of radio.
On this episode, Missy and I are talking about tools for managing life's addictions.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The show is about to begin.
Everyone, to another episode of On Finding Peace, the podcast where Missy and I talk about life skills that help us to find our inner peace and happiness on a daily basis. And today we have the interesting topic of talking about managing life's addictions, and we'll look at what we mean by that term and some of the skills and things that we can do on a daily basis to manage that and keep our inner peace at the same time. But unless you have a great background for your video, for those who are watching video, it looks like Missy is sitting outside in a nice, maybe tropical location by the reflection on your window.
Yeah, sunny Florida. Here we are. And you're outside too, though. So, or at least I don't know if that's a glass pane or a screen pane.
Yeah, no, it looks like I could be outside. I'm in our enclosed porch area. It's just a little too much on the cold side here up north to be totally sitting outside, but we should get warmer later in the day. So we'll see what happens.
That'll be nice.
Yeah,
I think we're at the fine line of sit outside or sweat your what off and stay in the AC. So I was like, you know what, I'll be probably sitting outside today, and maybe next week, the next time we do this, I probably won't be. So very fine line.
No, we're in that weird area where 2 days ago it was in the 70s, and then we had freezing rain the next day in the 30s yesterday, and then we'll be back to the 60s today. So
wow,
that's where we are with the weather.
Well, I know that you have a background in a clinical background in the things that we're talking about today, but I can't really pinpoint one person that I know who hasn't had some form of addiction touch their life. Right. And as you pointed out, the first thing most people go to is alcohol and drugs. But we also have, now we have phones, and we have, pornography, we have sugar and food and all kinds of things that I'm sure I'm not even thinking of, work addictions even, that I think that it's important to help keep your peace, to talk about these kind of tools that we can utilize when we notice that we're getting into that repetitive need to do whatever it is that we're doing.
Right. And for the behind the scenes look, Missy and I had been discussing for quite some time prior to hitting record of what we're going to call this, because we really want to focus on the fact that all of us, to varying degrees, really have our own addictions. And, I really don't want somebody to look at a title and say, oh, well, I'm not an addict, or I'm not in recovery, so this isn't a video for me. Because we're not just talking about, the illegal drugs and alcohol issues, but the other addictions that affect our lives and what we mean, by addictions. And I feel so old when I think about it, but I started working in the field of chemical addictions, which is clients with drugs and alcohol, back in the early 1990s. That seems so old.
No, that doesn't make you old. It makes you knowledgeable.
It could. I like the term wise, but we'll go with knowledgeable.
Wise is good too.
I used to say for the longest time, I spent 20 years in addiction work. And then I actually did the math, and it's way more than that. Oops.
Well, and it's funny. I was at an event last night, and it's an event that I do for my other business, and they had goodies out and sugar, and sugar is my, I would say drug of choice, right now is that's one thing that I'm managing. And I love this lady. She came up to me, and I was like, "Oh, is that cheesecake?" And she had this little tiny bite of cheesecake, and she was like, "No, it's tofu." And I was like, "Is it really?" And she was like, "Oh boy." Anyway, it was really cheesecake, and it was just a bite-sized piece. And she said, "You know what? These little pieces are good for me because I get to remind myself when I eat this that if I have another one, it's not going to get better. It's the same. And I was like, that's a really good way of looking at things that, like, especially when it comes to eating or things like that. Smoking a second cigarette when you're stressed out doesn't help really. You know what I mean? Or eating that extra bite or having a second plate full of food or whatever it is, that doesn't make it taste better. It just kind of usually makes us miserable,
Right.
and so I just thought that was kind of very interesting, a thing that she pointed out, and I wanted to share. Um,
Hmm.
because that's something that, like I said, I experience, and it's a great outlook on, we have these beliefs, and I don't think that if we really look at what our beliefs are, then we have any way of changing them.
Right. And I think just to keep this simple and very broad, when we look at addiction, it really is something that we're using or doing that would keep us from experiencing life in the present moment.
Yeah, very true. Yeah.
Um, and of course, there's way more complication to it, but I think in the general sense that's what it is, that when maybe we're feeling stressed or anxious, we tend toward the sugar, the sweets, or just throw snacks in us as stress eating, and
Yeah.
whatever that may be,
Or
and then some
hoarding.
people may take certain drugs or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's really, I think a lot of this deals with motivation, you know, be, because I get a lot of clients who will ask, like, what's that fine line? If I have a glass of wine every day with dinner, am I an alcoholic? And, my answer usually is, well, you could be, but you don't have to be.
Right.
Because part of that is, what is the motivation for you to have that glass of wine, every day?
Yeah, are you
Um,
covering up stress? Are you trying to get rid of, negative head thoughts, things like that? Or are you just like, you know what, gosh, I enjoy this, and it,
mhm.
you settle into it. Like there's balance, right? If
Yep.
it's escape that you're using it for, then likely it's not healthy, right? If it's just, I would enjoy this, then
Hmm.
that's a different attitude to have about it. It's not a need, it's not even a want, it's a pleasure.
Yeah. And there's really nothing wrong in rewarding, if you want to use that word, ourselves for, maybe we got through the day, and, how well or not well we got through the day. We're going to have this glass of wine and kind of, yeah, wind down from that day, and that's fine.
Yeah.
Um, the other thing I've asked people to do is, if you're not sure, stop the substance for a week,
Hmm.
whatever
Yeah.
it is, or your action or whatever. Just don't do it for a week, and see what happens. And for those who immediately give the pushback on doing something like that,
Yeah.
then I right away say, then you might want to examine, because if
Yeah.
you can't not do that for like a week, yes, there may be a deeper issue, which, again, in the broad sense of addiction, I'm not saying needs treatment and all, but that, if that's the issue, then that's taking away your inner peace.
Well, I went through a training, and they would say, what has you, basically, right? It's
Hmm.
controlling you, you're not controlling it. right? So, you know, and during these trainings, we were there for weekends at a time, you know, not succession, but, you know, we'd go for 3 days and then, you know, we'd go for a month and then we'd come back for 3 days. Anyway, and during those 3 days, they would ask you, no smoking, no drinking, you know, obviously no street drugs. I didn't want you to do drugs at all, but, and they would tell you, you know, no sugar. And that was the one that most people were, or no caffeine, you know, or things like that. And they were like, what do you mean no caffeine? What do you mean? What do you mean I can't have my coffee in the morning? And it's like, well, that becomes then a need, you know. It's not really something like, and you really don't need it, right? You'll survive without it, but mentally, you know, we have
Yep.
those beliefs that we hold, that that's what we rely on. That's a codependency. You know, if it's not an addiction, it does, you know, kind of favor towards codependency. And we can be that way with people as well.
Oh
You
yeah.
know what I mean? Like, it's not just substance or foods or drinks or anything like that. It can be, you know, animals. And we have emotional support animals, you know, just because there's a belief that that does something better for you than you being able to do it for yourself, you know. And that's just, you know, my perspective on it.
Yeah. No, and I agree, because even things that we could say are positive or healthy in our life could become, in this broad term of addiction, you know, a harmful or unhealthy thing.
Right.
You know, and I'll preface this next statement by saying I'm totally in favor of self-help groups. They are extremely effective. Love self-help groups. But I've had to work with some people who will substitute their whatever their addiction, you know, was in their life, and then they get into the self-help groups, and then that becomes their addiction.
Yep.
In the sense that, you know, they start going to, you know, like so many self-help groups that they're never home.
Yeah.
You know, then they start going into many different types of self-help groups.
Yeah.
And again, I'm all for self-help groups, and I'm not. And if you go, you know, listening, and you go to multiple self-help groups, I'm not saying that's bad. I'm not saying that at all. But again, if we're looking at inner peace, which has everything to do with life balance, you know, if my issue, say, was illegal drugs, and I was never home because I was always using those drugs, and now I'm not, I'm in self-help, which is an awesome thing to be in, but I'm in so many self-help meetings that I'm never home, then what's the difference to my family?
Well, and again, that can be the same for work, right? It can be the same
Yep.
for, you know, what you said in the beginning was, you know, it really takes you out of being present, right? Because you're constantly focused on other things that aren't allowing you to be with what's going on internally to help you have the ability to change your perspective, to understand what you're going through, and to figure out what you can do to you know, what tools you can use. Speaking of which, you know, I know that you're an expert in this field, so because you're so wise, right?
Well,
So what are
I'm
some of the
old.
things? I mean, like I said, this can be, this is a very broad um, subject that we are, you know, the addictions that we have are very broad. So what would you say that there are, you know, what kind of tools that people can use other than self-help groups? Like, what can you do for yourself alone that can
Hmm.
assist in maybe getting out of that kind of behavior?
Well, and I think that one thing we have to acknowledge with that is the answer to a question that I get posed a lot, that if we're doing a broad definition of addiction, then couldn't anything be an addiction? And I typically answer that with yes. You know, if we're using anything that we're doing or ingesting, if we're using that as the motive of escaping the present moment, then that's probably not healthy. And if we're continually doing it for that reason, then sure, that could be an addiction, which means anything could be addiction, if done in the wrong way for the wrong reasons. So I think when we look at coping, again, we have to remind ourselves that not only could most of us probably say we've been in some ways affected by substance addictions, whether ourselves, family members, close friends. And I think everybody's been impacted in some way.
Right.
But now when we broaden the definition, we can say that probably most, if not all of us, have some sort of addiction ourselves.
Right.
So when it comes to, like you're saying, work and or play,
Yeah,
or
phone.
exercise,
I mean, food, you got it. Exactly. Exercise is definitely another one. And
and so really when you come to the coping skills, like there isn't like a self-help group to say you're exercising too much that I'm aware
yeah,
of.
yeah.
Um, because again, when you look at something like, say, exercise, if you are exercising to a degree that, it's interfering with your job, with your relationships, with home life, whatever, then I think the issue is, one, the quick thing, change that behavior. So
Right.
you just start to cut down. So if you're going to the gym, let's say 5 times a day, can you cut that down maybe in half, give
Right.
or take, for the moment. But I think the bigger issue is very similar in all of the addictions, is to look at the why, the motivation. What was the purpose of me going 5 times a day to the gym to begin with? Because I don't know now. Exercise not my thing. I will preface that. But when it used to be my thing, there was a time in my life it was my thing. I never met a single trainer at the gym who would tell anybody to come 5 days or
Right.
5 times in a day,
Right.
to the gym. So in that sense, what's the reason? Why do you feel that need? Is it a compulsion? Is it an escape?
Yeah.
So I think that's where the coping skills really comes in, is that first we just change the actual behavior. But we have to look at the why, because if we don't answer that question, we're going right back to that.
Right.
So maybe I can cut down my times at the gym for a few days, but if I've never addressed the why, I'm right back at it.
Right. No, that's great. What about I know we mentioned support groups, but what about therapies? I mean, because like here's the other thing is like, I have a belief that I've seen, I should say, in my experience, I have seen people trade one addiction for another, right?
Oh,
And
definitely.
I've been guilty of this myself, right? Okay, well, let's say I'm I'm not going to drink anymore. Well, I'll just smoke more cigarettes, right? Or okay, I quit smoking cigarettes. Well, I'll just work more, or even checking your phone, like, oh, okay, well, I'm bored. I don't have anything to do. Let me check my phone again. Let me get on Instagram. Let me get on Facebook, whatever, social media addictions. Right. And so, I mean, is there a cognitive behavioral therapy, if you will, that would help kind of break the cycle?
Definitely. And I like that you brought that one up, because that is my favorite.
Yeah.
Um, so yes, because through now the many decades of me doing this work, not just the two that I used to always say, um, really what I discovered, and the basis for those who are unfamiliar with cognitive behavioral therapy, very quickly and basically, is we're looking at the way we think and at the way that we act, our behaviors, and which of those are healthy and which of those are unhealthy. Obviously keep the healthy, and then we either reframe the unhealthy or we try to get rid of the unhealthy. Either way, depends on what that is. So yeah, in a very true way, if you catch yourself, addicted to something that especially is typically seen as healthy. And I'll just use exercise again because I think it's just ironic that I would never even come close to being addicted to exercising. But for somebody who is, the hardest part with that is to convince somebody that something so healthy can actually be an addiction. It's obvious if we were to say certain foods or sugars or porn or illegal drugs. I mean, those are like simple.
Right.
But when you say to somebody, you're doing something that's good for you, you're just doing it in an addictive way. Like, well, what does that mean? If it's good for me, it's good for me.
Right.
So really it comes then into that cognitive behavioral of, well, then I need to look at my thoughts and what are my thoughts and how do I reframe those thoughts? So this is healthy for me. Can too much of a good thing be a bad thing?
Right.
And some of that is education. I mean, going with the exercise one, we can look at the benefits of exercising and educate ourselves of the benefits, but what are the negatives of over exercising? And I know those exist too.
Well,
So
that really
beginning
just
to educate oneself.
it leads to awareness, right?
Mm-hmm.
And even sometimes those mental thoughts and being aware of what's going on, because when you're in automatic, you're really not aware of that, right?
No.
And so like I kind of like the analogy of like watching a movie. When you're watching a really, really good movie, you are in the movie. You are like, oh my gosh, if somebody comes out and jumps out of nowhere, then I'm going to scream because I'm in this movie. That's how good it is. And then there's those other movies that are kind of like, this is okay, but you could still have conversations. You could still, like you're paying attention to what's going on, but you're not like as affected emotionally, if you will, in the watching of the movie. Now that to me is being an observer, because we can be an observer of our life. We can be an observer of what's going on in our minds. And that really kind of pulls us out of judgment so much when we're just kind of watching and seeing what's going on. And for me, that's huge for anybody who's going through addiction, because without judgment, I say that because if I know anybody who thinks of an addiction, whether it's substance or otherwise, that's a bad word, right? And there's judgment right there. That's not a positive word in your life. And so if we can do it without judgment, then we might be able to have the ability to go like, okay, I'm not sure that this is the path that I want to take. So maybe we should switch things up a little bit.
Language and word usage.
I'm sorry, you blipped out for a minute.
Oh, do you have me back?
Yes.
Awesome. No, I was just saying it's great that you were talking about language and word usage, because it does mean a lot, especially when you're talking about more of the cognitive behavioral work, because we're going to take words and use their meaning, and then that's going to affect our lives. And even though I've been saying the word addiction over and over in this, just for the purpose of this podcast, that's a word that usually in my daily life and even working with my clients, I'm rarely using that word.
Right.
Because like I say, that word has a judgment connotation to it
Very heavy.
To begin with.
Yeah.
And even nowadays, official diagnoses don't use addiction. They use substance use, substance abuse, but not addiction.
Right.
So I think, words do mean things, and that is an important distinction, that we're not judging ourselves, especially if we're doing something good, we're just overdoing something good. I don't want to judge anybody because their actual intentions are probably right deep down. That's why they're doing something good.
Right.
It's just gotten out of hand for some reason. And that's where you're going to lose your inner peace, because now if you were chasing a drug or alcohol and now you're chasing something that's positive, you're still chasing something, and
Right.
and there's no peace, inner peace, if we're chasing things. We're not sitting still with ourselves.
It's so funny. Lately, I had a conversation with a girlfriend of mine, and one of the things, it came up in conversation was about the becoming, right? How most people, we're going through our lives and we're becoming more and elevating ourselves, and we're becoming. But I like to think of it as that we really already are. We've always been. We're just
Hmm.
remembering, right? And so it's more about waking up to the fact that you already have everything that you need. And that's
Hmm.
my belief, because I know some people are like, you have to go get it, it's outside of you. But for me, I feel like everything that you experience comes from inside of yourself. And I also want to take just a quick moment to applaud all of the people who are going through some kind of recovery or some kind of support system to figure out you know
Hmm.
how to change the behavior that they've gone through, because I know that that's a challenge and a struggle for a lot of people. And there's probably not a lot of people patting them on the back going, good job. So I just want everybody, I want them to know that we're proud of them, because
Hmm.
it's a challenge. It is a challenge. I mean, like, you talk about our listener challenge, that's a challenge every second of the day for these people.
Oh yeah.
And you know, it affects many. It affects many, and I don't think it's talked about enough in a positive, because most people think, oh well, they'll never change. And I want our listeners to know, no matter what your addiction is, you can change it. You just
Hmm.
have to first hold the belief about yourself that you can. So
Yep.
yeah, I think that's very important.
No, that's an awesome point to bring up, and especially when people look at it, addictions from the substance, use, alcohol, drugs, legal, illegal, doesn't matter.
Right.
Um, that people do look at that and say, well, so many people relapse that, yeah, people aren't going to change. I hear that phrase all the time: once an addict, always an addict. And to me, I think that that's one of the most hurtful put downs, that we could give anybody, because as humans are always changing. We always have the ability to change.
Right.
And I mean, the biggest fact is, we've changed from infant to whatever your age happens to be.
Right.
So I mean, right there, physically we change,
Yeah.
and we continue to change. So emotionally we're doing the same. I mean, for those who say, we can't change, I mean, if you're an adult, does that mean emotionally you're still a 3-year old?
Yeah.
Because in your mind, then if we can't change, then you should still be emotionally and mentally at a very young state.
Yeah, right.
But
You
we're
wouldn't be
not, because
walking
we
and
do
talking and
change.
driving and doing
Yeah,
all the adulting things
because you
that we do.
changed.
Yeah.
And some of that comes from just pure education. We've gone to school, we've learned things, but a lot of recovery is education.
Yeah.
A lot of recovery process isn't just simply going to like support group meetings or meeting with a counselor who does as mumbo jumbo how you feel and stuff. A
Right.
lot of substance work and recovery is reading and educating yourself about your body, how it works, how those chemicals work in the body.
Mhm.
So just like we change from childhood to adulthood through education and experience, no different in recovery.
Right.
They're learning each day by experience, by education, observing others. It's awesome work.
I was going to say that I also, I believe in unconditional love, right?
Hmm.
And I also believe in second chances. But I also believe in 500 chances. I believe in, astronomical, unlimited amount of chances. And a lot of people aren't like that, and I understand that. But the reason I feel like I do is because I want to treat other people like I want to be treated. And I know how many
Yep.
times I've fallen on my face right? And I have no problems getting myself back up, but I want my support system to be somebody who goes, it's okay, you fell, no problem, let me help you dust your knees off, and we'll get back on the train, you know. And if you don't have those kind of people in your life, it's okay to let them go, you know, because some people, it might be parents, it might be friends, it might be you know, people that you're around because of the addiction that you have. But if they're not supporting you in changing something you feel is unhealthy for yourself, then it's okay to let them go. And I think that's really important, because again, sometimes it can be somebody very close to you that makes you feel like, or you feel like you shouldn't let go of, because they are who they are too, whatever title they wear. And
Right.
I just want people to know that they deserve that support, you know. You know, and you will find people that are supportive of it once you walk away from the people who aren't. You will find
Yep.
new people, and they will be impactful in your life.
And that shows that ability for change, you know, to understand that if somebody doesn't believe that you can become a better person, regardless of what your past was, that's not a healthy person to be with.
Right.
You know, because as we said, we all change. And, you know, for, you know, people who will say, well, you know, like once an addict, always an addict, you know, and what's the point? They're never going to get better. You know, one of the other responses I give is, you know, I've been doing this since 1994. Why would I be doing something for so long if it was never effective?
Right.
You know, so I can attest to the thousands, if not more, people that I have interacted with, either clinically or not, who have gotten better, who have changed their lives and are continually changing their lives, who are productive members of society, who, you know, are no different than anybody else. You know,
Right.
they fell down, they got up, the struggle was real, and they moved on. Um, Now, do some people don't get it? Sure. You know, have some people never gotten recovery and continue to live in whatever their addictions are? Sure.
Yeah.
I'm not saying this is 100%,
Right.
but we can't say that it doesn't work, because I can name you thousands of people that I know that change works.
Right.
And I'm not just talking substances, you know, I'm talking various addictions. Change works. Um, and if you don't believe change works, then, you know, do you believe that you can't change?
Right. Well, cheers to you and them for, you know, helping change our world and making it a more peaceful place, right? And I don't know if anybody can see this if you're watching us on YouTube. And I don't know.
What do you got there? Oh,
And I think that that's a huge
we
part.
lost your audio a second.
Oh,
What did
okay.
you? What does it say?
It says you are enough.
Oh, you are enough.
You are enough. You are enough.
Awesome.
No matter what you've been through, no matter what you're going through, no matter what you're addicted to, it doesn't matter. You are enough exactly like you are, and you are set up for success. So, you know, move forward in a way determined and knowing that you cannot fail. So even if you
Hmm.
slip and fall, you get back up and you keep going.
It's
So
not about the falling.
no,
It's about what you do after you fall. Do you stay down or do you get up?
you know, and that's
That's
the
what it's
thing.
about.
I think that even if, I mean, like I can think of many people in business, like, you know, we'll go with Edison, right? 1,000 ways to make a light bulb, or that didn't work, right? Or,
Yep.
but that's it. It's the continual motion of trying, of getting back up and doing it over again, and just having that determination to be, maybe you're not currently in that moment, but you could probably imagine what that moment feels like when you're complete with your addiction. And I I encourage people to sit with that and imagine what it would be like, and get the feeling for that kind of life without it. And I think that'll lead you towards something that you'd be excited about changing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I like that. That sounds like a summary. I like it.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys all for listening. We really appreciate you. And if you have questions or comments and you'd like to chime in on this podcast, please send us a message, and we'd love to discuss it with you.
Yep. And any ideas you may have for future podcasts, please let us know that as well.
Okay.
All right.
Bye,
Thanks,
everybody.
everyone.